don't talk to chat, don't talk to AI, talk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I feel like a lot of us have been thinking about how AI is going to change our lives, and I think one way it has already changed our lives is the way people are now using AI as therapists. And we're now seeing people seeking advice from artificial intelligence instead of real human connection or instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think that the increasing individualistic values that society has adopted collectively and globally plays a part in why so many of us are so AI dependent, especially since there's a trend of cutting people off for minor disputes or our egos coming in the way of us texting our friends first or too often, or sometimes some of us can be a bit self-absorbed to the point where we disrespect other people's time and show up late to hangouts or cancel last minute. Thus, people are depending on AI rather than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or human connection. We've all heard about the risks of AI, how AI can surveil you, it collects all of your data, and then it goes God knows where. And I kind of want to push this point further by saying, whenever you write to AI, it is not a bottomless pit where you can just pour your heart out to. It's going to go somewhere, and whoever's on the other side will see it. And I've even heard that whatever you write on AI, like let's say you're talking to ChatGPT, whatever you write and then erase, it's still being recorded. Like somehow they can still see what you are about to send. You didn't even send it. So AI is kind of scary when it comes to privacy. And yes, AI is a very helpful tool that we'll probably need to use in the future in our careers. However, we need to be very careful what we tell AI, which I'm sure we all know. So when people hear about the risks of AI, there's two ways that people tend to react. On one hand, we have people who will be like, okay, this is serious. I need to get off social media, delete everything, only use a flip phone, or even revert back to caveman times and just not use the internet at all. And on the other hand, we have people who will be like, you know what? AI is everywhere. There's nothing I could do. They're gonna know my information. I have nothing to hide. Might as well use it however I want to. So clearly, there's two extreme ends of the spectrum, and we just need to find a middle ground because you're losing something and gaining something on both ends. So it is a double-edged sword. We've also been hearing recently that AI is a tool that is being used by the Dajjal to deceive people, and we know AI is full of deception and illusions, and it tricks a lot of people. And we see that actually some people are just being targeted more than others, especially elderly people. They're definitely the main target for scam callers because they know that elderly people don't know as much about new technology. So knowing all this about AI, as Muslims, I think we should try to set up limits, put up boundaries, have safeguards when it comes to using this tool. And the biggest threat to our iman as Muslims is when we rely on AI psychologically. That is emotionally, spiritually, and even social connection. Some people will use AI as a friend, some people will use AI as a therapist, some people will seek Islamic advice or Islamic knowledge from AI, which we all know is a bit iffy because AI is not perfect, it makes mistakes, so it's not really reliable when it comes to that stuff. So the problem arises when you rely on AI instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to relieve your heart, lighten your load, and remove your anxiety. In Surah Ash-Sharh, you see exactly what I'm talking about, where it shows that Allah is the one who will remove your burdens that weigh heavily on your back, and it is to Him you should turn to for everything with hope. And in Surah Al-Fatiha, the surah that we recite every single day in every single one of our prayers, we say, you alone we worship, you alone we ask for help. And emphasis on alone, because if you go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone before anyone or anything else, it helps you build an intimate relationship of dependence. And in my opinion, I believe it is one of the only most healthy relationships of dependence that exists in this world. And you know something else? In Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names, we have Al-Wakil, the disposer of affairs. As-Salam, the giver of peace. Al-Mu'min, the giver of iman and security. Al-Fatah, the opener, which we also see in Surah At-Talaq, which is literally one of my favorite surahs. He says, and whoever is mindful of Allah, He will make a way out for them and provide for them from sources they could never imagine. And whoever puts their trust in Allah, He alone is sufficient for them. Once again, we rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not on AI. And you know that well-known surah that we've heard many Palestinians say, Hasbi Allahu wa ni'mal wakil, Allah is sufficient for us and He is the best disposer of affairs, which you can also find in the Quran in Surah Al-Imran. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. It is clear for anyone who has intellect and who reflects. And I believe that our relationships with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should not be digital. It should go beyond your screen. In object relations theory, which was developed by Donald Winnicott, it says that humans rely on transitional objects, often physical items, to bridge the gap between self and the external world. So transitional objects are items that children use to be able to have a smooth transition from being dependent on their mothers to becoming independent and having autonomy. So the examples of transitional objects that many kids tend to have are blankets, teddy bears, pillows, usually soft items because they symbolize the softness that you get from your mother. So kids see their mothers, or I should say babies, see their mothers as a extension of themselves, and their mothers give them all of their primary needs like food, cleaning their diapers, sleep, etc., as well as emotional soothing needs. And once those kids grow up, they have to become independent, and to make that transition smoother, they have certain items that symbolizes that soothing emotional needs that they used to get from their mothers. However, I think that transitional objects are going to start looking more and more like rectangular devices, aka tablet kids that we're seeing a lot nowadays. And I think that behavior is going to continue into adulthood, where AI dependent adults will be having AI as their transitional object permanently. A study done on AI dependency shows us that some people feel incomplete in the absence of AI technology because they see it as an extension of themselves. So the absence of AI is perceived as a loss of a crucial part of oneself, which is kind of similar to how children see their mothers as an extension of themselves. So when you depend on AI for your emotional and spiritual needs, you'll unintentionally drift away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because you're depending on AI, running to AI to heal you and calm your heart. So yes, AI is a helpful tool, but I think it should never get in between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It should never intervene with your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think as Muslims, what we can do is, well, at least if you're someone who uses AI a lot, for example, if you use ChatGPT and like to ask advice or just anything to ChatGPT, instead of doing that, I think we can stop ourselves and go and talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instead. And I feel like that's not only going to better your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's also going to improve your salah. Because if you're constantly in conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I feel like it's gonna just make your salah even better because you're already used to being in conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, it's not limited to only your prayer. You're talking to Allah all throughout the day. Like, you know what I mean? Anyways, I hope this video was helpful and I'll see you in the next one.